Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with them. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. In a world full of superpowers, some use their gifts to save while others use them to destroy. Izuku Midoriya had dreamed of becoming a hero since a young age, inspired by All Might, the #1 hero and symbol of peace. Most children received their quirks at the age of 4 or 5, with a few discovering theirs at 6, while some had none at all. Izuku had a friend named Katsuki Bakugo, and they both visited the quirk doctor at 4 to learn about their abilities. Bakugo's quirk was explosion, allowing him to sweat nitroglycerin that he could ignite. Izuku, however, possessed a unique quirk, the ability to stop and manipulate time, which he named Stopwatch. One day, while playing, Izuku tripped, and just before he fell, his quirk activated subconsciously. Time froze, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a world devoid of color, everything suspended in place. Initially scared, he tried various things until he closed his eyes and shouted, "Unpause." Time resumed, and he realized he had activated his quirk. A smile spread across his face as he recalled that he had unconsciously said, "Stop." By repeating the command, he could freeze time again. He shared this exciting news with Bakugo, and they both celebrated. They rushed home to tell their families, marking the beginning of Izuku Midoriya's journey as the timeless hero and the eternal symbol of peace. After mastering the basics of his quirk, Izuku decided to train seriously once he turned 10. Time flew by, and the day after his birthday, he began to think about how to enhance his abilities. He discovered that while he could use his quirk at will, the duration it remained active depended on his stamina. Initially, he could pause time for just 3 seconds, but he knew that practice would help him level up. With determination, he trained relentlessly for 2 years, and soon his quirk was on the verge of a breakthrough. One day, Izuku felt a strange glow in his eyes. He had reached a new level. He experimented and found he could not only stop and resume time but also slow down or speed it up. He could slow time significantly but found that speeding it up by 500% left him exhausted after just 5 seconds. However, he realized he could make something age 25 years in that brief moment. This was just the beginning of his journey. Izuku continued to train hard for 3 more years until he was 15, reaching level 5 and honing his control further. He also learned various fighting styles, such as boxing and kung fu, knowing that despite his powerful quirk, he needed combat skills to win fights. By this time, he could stop time for up to 100 seconds and had discovered all the basic functions of his quirk. Now, he aimed to create new moves to enhance his abilities. One day, Izuku visited Bakugo's house. When he knocked, Katsuki's sister, Katsumi, answered. Izuku asked, "Katsumi-san, do you know where Kaken is?" She replied, "Yeah. He's in his room upstairs." "Thanks, Katsumi-san." Izuku ran up the stairs to Bakugo's room, and they talked for a while before heading home to rest, knowing the next day was crucial for them. The UA entrance exam was approaching. UA was renowned as the greatest school for aspiring heroes, and the entrance exam was notoriously challenging. Katsuki, Katsumi, and Izuku were all determined to attend. The day of the exam arrived, and they knew they had only one chance to succeed. Failing meant waiting a whole year for another opportunity. As they reached the gate of UA, Izuku tripped on something and, just before falling, caught himself using his quirk. They found their way to the auditorium. Present Mike, a pro hero, was going to give a speech before the exam. Once all the examinees arrived, he began, "Can I get a hey?" Everyone remained silent. You could hear a pin drop. Mike's sweat dropped and continued, "Okay then. Welcome to the UA entrance exam. There will be many obstacles." He continued his speech, but most of the people present had stopped paying attention. After a little while, though, everyone started to focus again as Mike got into the important details. There will be foe villains which you have to defeat. There will be 3 kinds. The weakest will be worth 1 point, the medium ones 2 points, and the strongest ones 3 points. Suddenly, a kid with blue hair and shining specs stood up. It was clear he was a stickler for rules. He interrupted Mike, saying, "Sir, in the guidebook, It says there are 4 kinds of robots. If this is a mistake, then it is immensely shameful for the institution. And you. He pointed to Izuku, the one with the green hair. You've been mumbling continuously. It is very distracting. Please stop. Izuku, who hadn't noticed the blue-haired kid, stopped mumbling and looked at him. Then he stood up and said, I'm sorry. But first of all, you're the only one who is being disturbed by my muttering. And secondly, if you waited for like 5 more seconds, Sensei Mike would have explained it. Izuku then sat down, and the blue-haired kid, now red with embarrassment, sat down as well. Present Mike then said, Thank you. Anyway, as I was saying, the 4th one is nothing but an obstacle. It is worth no points. It is best if you avoid it. On everybody's slip, the zone they have to go to is marked. Once everybody reaches, I will announce the beginning of the exam. After he finished, everybody went to their respective zones. Izuku was in Zone D, Katsuki in Zone A, and Katsumi was with her brother. The entrance exam was about to begin. Izuku's quirk was very useful and had a lot of potential. However, it had one problem: attack power. It didn't possess enough strength to defeat an opponent. This, however, could be remedied easily. He learned multiple different hand-to-hand combat styles but realized that wasn't enough. So he also learned to use a sword. One day, while practicing, he accidentally discovered something. He had subconsciously imbued his sword with his time power, causing the tree he was practicing on to suddenly turn to dust. However, this happened subconsciously, and as a result, when he did that attack, he lost the trance-like state he was in, and the blade lost its effect. He realized this was a very powerful and dangerous ability. It could potentially save his life if he were in danger. He trained and experimented for the next week and finally managed to get it under control. He named it the Timeless Sword, a strike that could transcend time. Back to the present, Present Mike had started the countdown. 1. The doors began to open as he started the countdown and finished when he said Izuku, without bothering about the other participants, rushed in. The blue-haired kid immediately shouted, Hey! The countdown hasn't finished yet? Mike retorted, Do you think there will be countdowns in real life? That kid's got the right idea. What are you waiting for? Go, go, go! Immediately, everybody started running. However, Izuku had already reached the first of the foe villains. His sword struck out 5 times, and 5 2-pointers turned to dust. Then he activated his quirk, 50%, and time immediately slowed down to half of its normal speed. Izuku started to go after the foe villains closest to him. He could currently maintain a 50% reduction for 20 seconds, followed by a 5-second cooldown PRD. However, 20 seconds were more than enough. To everybody, it seemed like everything suddenly slowed down to half of the normal speed while his speed didn't change. They looked on in shock as he destroyed 12 1-pointers, 7 2-pointers, and 5 3-pointers. In total, he now had 51 points. To get into the hero course, one needed just 40 points, so he had surely secured his position. He got atop a building and waited for the time to run out. He was unaware that a group of heroes were currently in the observation deck, watching their performance and commenting. Everyone had been startled by Izuku. This seemingly unimpressive kid was capable of defeating even some pros. That was saying something. The Chimera, who also happened to be the principal Nizu, suddenly smiled. All the heroes, upon seeing that smile, shivered slightly. They knew that smile all too well. Nizu looked at a red button near him and said, Well, I believe it's time to let it out. All Might, the symbol of peace and the number 1 hero, said concerned, Are you sure, sir? Nizu didn't respond and pressed the button. Suddenly, all the participants were alerted. It felt as though there was an earthquake. Suddenly, a foe villain the size of a 10-story building appeared. Everybody's reaction was the same, run. Izuku, however, was different. He saw that due to the stampede, many people had fallen over. Suddenly, he noticed a purple-haired girl with what seemed like earphone jacks coming out of her ears. There was a large slab of concrete on her leg. She was asking for help, but no one was bothering. This made Izuku furious. He immediately activated his quirk, and time slowed down to a crawl. Izuku started to calmly walk toward the 0-pointer. However, while his demeanor was calm, his aura was furious. His voice coldly rang out in everyone's ears, "Cowards!" With 3 precise strikes on the zero-pointer, he was confident he had destroyed it. He then freed the purple-haired girl by removing the boulder from her leg. After stopping his quirk, everything returned to normal. He asked her, "What's your name?" "Kyoka. Kyoka Jiro." "Are you okay? Can you walk?" "I've sprained my ankle, but other than that, everything seems fine." "Alright, that's good." With that, Izuku got up just as the bell rang, signaling the end of the exam. Unbeknownst to him, the heroes watching had appreciative smiles on their faces. One of the heroes, who looked like he hadn't slept in years, suddenly spoke up, "I want him in my class." Present Mike, shocked by the declaration, asked, "Aizawa, are you sure?" "Yes." This disheveled figure was indeed Shoyuta Aizawa, the pro-hero Eraserhead. After the exam, Izuku met up with Bakugo and Katsumi, and they headed home together. Once there, they all took some rest, but Izuku couldn't sleep. While fighting the zero-pointer, he had sensed a change in his quirk. He got into a meditative pose to explore it further and realized that his quirk had evolved into its true form. He discovered he could now stop or slow time in a specific area. The smaller the area, the longer he could freeze or slow time. He decided to rest for the day and practice the next day. After dinner, he went to sleep. The following day, he woke up early, had breakfast, and went out to practice. He began to explore his new ability, spending almost 30 minutes getting a sense of his capabilities. He opened his eyes and raised his hands toward a part of the beach. Suddenly, a small orb about the size of a tennis ball began to form in his palm. It took him 5 minutes to condense the orb, which then shot forth toward the beach. Upon contact, it expanded to a sphere with a radius of 1 meter. Izuku smiled brightly and continued to practice, determined to execute the ability faster. He spent the entire afternoon improving, and finally, he was able to condense one of those orbs in just 10 seconds. When he returned home, he rested until his mother entered the room with an envelope in hand. "Izuku, it's here," she said. He took it and replied, "Thanks, Mom," then went upstairs to his room. There, he tore open the letter, revealing a projector. The projector turned on, displaying a familiar figure. "My name is Shota Aizawa. I'll be your class teacher. You secured a total of 106 points, including the hero and villain points. I'm too lazy to explain the point system. Welcome to your Hero Academia." Izuku smiled and said, "My Hero Academia? Huh? Peh." The next day, Izuku woke up earlier than usual. He completed his regular exercise, had breakfast, and freshened up before putting on the uniform that had arrived the day before. After assuring his mother that everything was fine, he set out for UA. A little later, he finally arrived at the school. He entered the building and began searching for Class 1A. After navigating the labyrinthine corridors, he took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside, he was greeted by a scene beyond his imagination, Bakugo arguing with Tenya Ida. Ignoring the two, he chose an empty seat away from them and noticed a yellow caterpillar lying on the ground. Deciding it wasn't worth pondering, he sat down. Suddenly, he heard, "Hey, you're the guy who saved me, aren't you?" It was Kyoka. "Well, that's what it seems like." He stood up and extended his hand toward her. "The name's Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you." "Likewise. The name's Jiro. Kyoka Jiro." Just then, Midoriya grinned as everyone noticed a yellow caterpillar-looking thing stand up. The caterpillar was actually a sleeping bag. Suddenly, the man inside popped out and said, "It took you all 8.7 seconds to quiet down. We need to fix that. My name is Shota Aizawa. I'm your homeroom teacher." He pulled out a PT uniform from seemingly nowhere and added, "Put on your PT uniforms. We're going to have a test of sorts. Meet me in the field in 5 minutes." With that, he walked out. The class remained stunned, except for Midoriya, who was still grinning and seemed amused as he left the room calmly. After a few moments of silence, chaos erupted as everyone scrambled to the changing rooms. By the time the others reached the field, Midoriya had already finished changing. He walked to the field where Aizawa was waiting. Aizawa noticed him, looked at his watch and nodded. Good. You're pretty efficient with time. Well, since it's a must if I want to control my quirk. Is that so? I'm beginning to like you, kid. At that moment, the others arrived at the field, and Katsuki immediately spotted Midoriya. But when'd you get here? I've been here for quite some time, Kaken. While I don't mind the banter, we need to get this done, Aizawa interjected. We will conduct a series of tests to determine how well you can utilize your quirks. There will be 6 tests, a speed test, a strength test, a ball throw test, an endurance test, a side jump test, and a high jump test. These tests are designed to push your abilities to the limit. The tests began, and as expected, Midoriya excelled in the speed and endurance tests. He placed 3rd in the side jump test and 4th in the high jump test. He shattered the strength measuring machine. Finally, it was time for the ball throw. Katsuki was asked to demonstrate and achieved an impressive distance of 478 meters. Ochako Uraraka, with her unique ability, recorded an infinite distance as she erased the ball's gravity. Then it was Midoriya's turn. Midoriya, it's your turn, Aizawa called. Okay, let's get this over with, Midoriya replied, standing at the designated spot with the ball in hand. He took a deep breath and threw the ball. The moment it left his hand, it seemed to vanish, and all sound stopped. This silence lasted for 5 seconds before a thunderous roar echoed as the ball broke the sound barrier multiple times. Everyone was astonished. Aizawa grinned as he showed the meter in his hand, which displayed an error message. The ball couldn't handle the power and got obliterated. The last measured distance was 793 kilometers, Aizawa clarified. He then presented a performance list, with Midoriya at the top and Minoru Mineta at the bottom. Mineta, pack your bags. You're out, Aizawa said as he left. Today was certainly eventful, Midoriya remarked, unaware that a certain pro-hero was watching him closely. The day passed uneventfully until it was time for the class everyone had been eagerly anticipating. Hero Studies with All Might. The students buzzed with excitement, chatting about various topics, but the main focus was on All Might, the current symbol of peace. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed as the door swung open, and a familiar voice boomed, I am here like a normal person. All Might entered and almost everyone thought, so cool. Almost everyone except for Midoriya, who thought, that is anything but normal. Out of nowhere, All Might produced a card that read, Battle Training. Bakugo smirked while Midoriya raised an eyebrow. But, All Might continued, every hero needs a good costume. He pulled out a remote and pressed a button, causing shelves with their names to pop out. The students rushed to the shelves, excitedly retrieving their costumes and heading to the changing rooms. Meet me in Ground D. All Might called as he left. Izuku approached the shelf and took out his costume, smiling slightly as he made his way to the changing rooms. Inside, he found Katsuki yelling at a red-haired student who was half-dressed, while the others ignored the commotion to put on their costumes. Choosing to focus on his own preparation, Izuku donned his costume and used a special ability he developed, called Warp. It bent space and time around him, creating a tunnel for him to walk through, effectively shortening the distance. He arrived at the training ground to find All Might waiting. All Might seemed surprised by Izuku's sudden appearance but quickly regained his composure. Soon after, the other students filed in. You guys already look like heroes. But now the real training starts. All Might announced, pulling out a script that made the students sweat. Listen up. The villains have stolen a nuclear device and are hiding it in a building. The heroes must go in to recover the device and capture the villains. There will be 8 teams of 2 people, decided by lottery. Izuku's classmate raised his hand and said, Is this because we may have to partner up with people we don't know? Truly UA is the greatest hero school. All Might's sweat dropped, responding, Why yes indeed. The students went over to draw their lottery ball, and the team distribution ended up as follows. Team A, Ochako Uraraka and Masahiro Ojiro. Team B, Momo Yaoyorozu and Hantasiro. Team C, Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo. Team D, Izuku Midoriya and Kyoka Jiro. Jiro approached Izuku. Seems like we're a team. Indeed. So what's your quirk? He asked. My quirk is earphone jack. It allows me to hear very far and create sound of any frequency. That's a really useful quirk. My quirk is stopwatch, which allows me to stop or manipulate time in any way I see fit. Jiro stared at Izuku, wide-eyed. You are just too OP. Yes, I am. All Might declared, okay, first will be Team A and Team B. Team A will be the heroes and Team G the villains. Just like that, battle training began. One after another, the battles concluded, some faster than others. Finally, it was Izuku and Jiro's turn. They say bonds forged in battle last a lifetime. Whether they do or not remains to be seen, but one thing is certain, a bond will definitely form between these two. All Might called out, Team C versus Team D. Team C will be the villains and Team D will be the heroes. Team C may enter the building to hide the bomb and make a plan. Ida and Bakugo entered the building, hiding the bomb and strategizing. Bakugo said, that broccoli is going to try and finish it quickly, so be careful. He can stop or even skip time, and if you're not cautious, you'll be done for. Ida noticed Bakugo's seriousness and nodded. Okay. Heroes may enter. Izuku looked at Jiro and nodded. They walked into the building together. Jiro knelt down and planted her earphones into the ground. Soon she heard the two. They split up, one is by the bomb, and the other is rushing towards us. The one rushing us is probably Bakugo. He's rash and doesn't think things through. I'll deal with him. Wait here. Izuku got up and walked forward. He stopped, closed his eyes, and opened them again. They were no longer the usual green but blue with black clock hands inside. This indicated he had activated his quirk. Suddenly, Bakugo appeared and punched at him. The clock in his eyes halted, and the world began to slow down until everything was frozen. He sighed, moved out of the way of the punch, and slammed his fist into Bakugo's gut, following it up with a roundhouse kick to the face. Then he unfroze time, and Bakugo went flying into the wall, crashing down unconscious. Too predictable, Izuku remarked as he walked forward. Observers were dumbfounded as Izuku seemed to disappear and reappear in a different spot, while Bakugo flew away as if Izuku had done nothing. Izuku and Jiro continued to the third floor where Ida was guarding the bomb. Izuku signaled to Jiro to send out a high-frequency sound blast at Ida. Jiro complied, and Ida barely reacted in time to dodge it. That was all it took for Izuku to finish it. He froze time again, walked up to Ida, and with a swift neck chop, knocked him out. Then he unfroze time and touched the bomb. A loud bell rang, signaling the end of the round and their victory. They walked back to the observation room as medical personnel entered to take Ida and Bakugo to Recovery Girl. To be continued. The rest of the day was quite uneventful. The students returned home. Izuku and Bakugo waited by the front gate for their friends. Soon, their friends arrived. Yo, said Izuku. Hey, replied Jiro and Uraraka almost in unison. After some small talk, the four started walking together to their respective houses. Soon, only Izuku and Bakugo remained. The others had gone inside, and the two childhood friends began to walk. They eventually parted ways. Upon reaching his house, Izuku went to the kitchen where his mother, Midoriya, was. She was a sweet and caring lady. The moment she saw Izuku, a huge smile spread across her face. She didn't even need to ask what he wanted to eat, she just knew. After they ate, Izuku went up to his room and started to meditate. He felt something inside himself growing, bubbling, waiting to explode. He began to explore this sensation and slowly figured it out. His power was evolving, nearing its final stage. He created a barrier around himself by bending the space. While he couldn't control space on a large scale, he could manipulate it in a small area around himself. With a sudden push, he poured out all the excess power rushing through his body into his quirk. If not for the barrier, he probably would have leveled everything within a 500-meter radius. The evolution of a quirk is a mysterious phenomenon. Most people don't understand why or how it happens. But one thing is certain, when it occurs, it makes the user much more powerful. The sudden evolution of his quirk caused Izuku to pass out. When Izuku regained consciousness, it was morning. He got up, disabled the barrier, and began to feel for changes. In his quirk, while there were no noticeable changes, something about him had indeed transformed. It was as if whatever had been holding him back had disappeared. He smiled and got ready for the next day of school. The week went by more or less without any problems. Occasionally, there were surprises, but nothing worth mentioning. They had all gotten used to Aizawa and his sudden exams. The moment Aizawa entered the classroom, everyone went quiet, dead quiet. Aizawa seemed pleased by their rationality, but soon suppressed it. "All right," he began, "today." At that moment, all the students sat straight in their seats, thinking, not another surprise test. Aizawa continued, unaware of their thoughts, "You're going to choose a class representative." The students relaxed and grew excited. Finally, a normal school event. They began chatting among themselves. All the students started to scream for others to choose them as though it was an election for the presidency of the country and not for class president. Suddenly, Ida raised his hand, saying, "I say we should vote on who should be the president." Everyone's sweat dropped at him as they noticed his hand was raised the highest. After the voting was done, the results were calculated. It turned out the class president was Izuku, and a girl named Momo was the vice president. As the bells rang, signaling the end of class, everyone excitedly headed to the cafeteria where Lunch Rush was serving food. Everyone had already formed their own groups and sat accordingly. While they were busy eating and chatting, a loud siren rang out. "Warning! Level 3 warning! Level 3 warning!" As the siren continued, the students began to panic and rush toward the doors. Realizing the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences of a stampede, Izuku immediately made a plan. He told Uraraka to use her quirk on Ida, who would go to the corridor and calm down the students. His plan went like clockwork. Meanwhile, Izuku went to the entrance gate and noticed it had been disintegrated, clearly the work of a quirk. At the same time, the teachers arrived. When they reached him, they saw Izuku kneeling on the ground, touching the ashes. He stood up and approached the teachers, saying, "There's been a breach. Whoever did this had clear intentions. They wanted us to know they can enter the school whenever they wish, and we cannot stop them. This is very concerning." After finishing, he went back to his class, deep in thought, leaving behind a group of stunned teachers. At an undisclosed location, a man in a tuxedo, who looked like he was made of clouds, said to a man in a hoodie covered in hands, "We are prepared. Everything should go as planned." The man known as Shigaraki started laughing menacingly, saying, "Tomorrow the world loses its symbol of peace. Hee 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 ha 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 ha." The next few days passed relatively quietly. Nothing out of the ordinary occurred, other than Aizawa's sudden tests. Everyone had gotten used to the routine, but their favorite class was still hero studies. Another week passed, and Aizawa, typically punctual, was late. It had already been 5 minutes since the bell rang, and everyone was chatting among themselves, confused about the delay. Suddenly, the door opened, and Aizawa walked in. He said, "Kids, put on your hero suits or PT uniforms. We're going to the USJ." The students cheered happily. Within 5 minutes, everyone was ready. Ida was trying to get everyone in line, and everyone watched him, amused. Suddenly Izuku said, "Ida, don't bother. It's not going to be that kind of bus." Ida turned around to reply but noticed the bus arriving, and to his dismay, it indeed was not that kind of bus. On the way, the students kept chatting with each other. Suddenly, Tsuyu Azui, a girl with a frog quirk, asked Izuku, "Hey, can I ask what your quirk is?" I couldn't tell what it was. "Also, call me Tsu." He replied, "Well, to answer your question, my quirk is stopwatch. It allows me to control time. With it, I can stop, slow, or accelerate time." The students listening looked at him in shock, which was to be expected. Soon after, they reached the USJ. The students got off the bus and walked up to the building, a huge complex containing various emergency scenarios. As they were still getting over the feeling of being overwhelmed, a person appeared. This person was the Pro Hero 13, who had a powerful quirk that allowed him to create a black hole with immense destructive power. He gave everyone a small speech on the dangers of using a quirk the wrong way, emphasizing that a single loss of control could cause the death of an innocent bystander. Suddenly, Kirishima, a boy with sharp teeth and red hair, said, "Hey look! They even have fake villains." Aizawa, who had reached the students by then, got into a fighting stance and said, "Those aren't fake. Those are real villains." A man with pale blue hair suddenly walked up and said, "I don't see All Might." "Oh well, I'm sure if we harm a few students, he will appear." Ha ha ha. Hearing this, the students panicked. The teachers went into battle, starting to fight. Suddenly, a portal opened, and out came a foggy man in a tuxedo. Bakugo, being as hot-headed as ever, charged at the villain, who introduced himself as Kurogiri. Kurogiri activated his quirk, resulting in a portal that sucked the students in. The students were scattered all around the USJ, where numerous villains had appeared. Izuku, who had been with the students before the portal appeared, used his quirk to shift his position in space and escape the portal's reach. He saw that all his friends and classmates were scattered, and fear caused panic among the students. Taking a moment to assess the situation and formulate a plan, Izuku took a deep breath and entered the fight. He noticed 3 villains about to ambush 2 of his classmates. He slowed time down to a crawl and sprang into action. He kicked one of the villains in the neck, slammed his fist into another's face, and roundhouse kicked the last one before restoring the flow of time. All 3 were flung away. He moved off to deal with the other villains, a force of nature, unstoppable. He took out several villains and assisted some of his classmates. Once he was sure that most of the villains had been subdued, he headed to the center of the building. There, he noticed Aizawa fighting the apparent leader of the group. As he rushed to help Aizawa, a hulking beast appeared and slammed its fist into Aizawa, sending him flying. Izuku caught him just in time, preventing serious injury. "Sensei, you okay?" Izuku asked, concern etched on his face. Aizawa looked at him. "It'll take more than that to take down Problem Child." Izuku turned his attention to the creature. The Hands villain spoke. "Did you like that? This thing is a bioengineered Nomu, designed to go toe-to-toe with All Might. Good luck." The students who had gathered at the gate froze in fear. Izuku watched the Nomu, trying to figure out how to combat it. Suddenly an idea struck him. He thought of time as an ocean, where movement disturbed the flow of time and space. He wondered if he could manipulate time so that it accelerated for just one object. Closing his eyes, he concentrated, feeling as though he was part of the world around him. It was as if he existed everywhere yet nowhere. When he opened his eyes, they had turned silver. He willed the flow of time around the Nomu to increase, pushing it to 100 times the normal rate. The students watched in shock. As the Nomu began to wither away, disappearing within moments. Shigaraki and Kurogiri, stunned, quickly made their escape. Izuku would have pursued them, but he felt an overwhelming exhaustion wash over him, as if all his energy had been drained. He collapsed unconscious just as they fled. Every quirk has a drawback, and Izuku's was no exception. His quirk drained his energy and stamina significantly. Additionally, it burdened him with knowledge, not just academic, but memories of the past, present, and future. Most of the time, he could only predict the future, but he carried the weight of millennia of memories. Once the villains left, Aizawa contacted UA, and heroes arrived within 10 minutes. In the end, about 132 villains were arrested, some of whom were on the police's wanted list. The school declared a week break. Izuku, meanwhile, was taken to the infirmary, where it took him 3 hours to wake up. When he finally opened his eyes, something felt different. It was as if he had matured by 300 years during his unconsciousness, having assimilated memories that weighed heavily on his mind. If he had woken up too soon, the burden of that knowledge might have overwhelmed him. Once he was fully awake, he got dressed and made his way home, unaware that the end had begun. Meanwhile, Shigaraki and Kurogiri returned to their base, still reeling from the encounter. Shigaraki asked, "How is that possible? That thing was supposed to be able to go toe-to-toe with All Might. Someone cheated." Kurogiri replied, "Tamura, you need to calm down. Did you notice that green-haired kid? His eyes turned silver, and then the Nomu disintegrated. I believe his quirk was responsible. Shigaraki growled, DMing them all. A dark, menacing voice interrupted. Tamura, calm down. You'll have your chance. This was just the first of many. Hide for now and prepare for the next attack. Shigaraki took a deep breath. Yes? At UA, a group of heroes convened to discuss the incident. The R-rated pro hero Midnight asked Aizawa, Shota, you said the man covered in hands claimed the Nomu could go toe-to-toe with All Might. How did you defeat it? Aizawa, maintaining his usual bored demeanor, replied, I didn't beat it. One of my students did. The news shocked the teachers. The idea that a student could defeat something meant to challenge All Might was incredible. Midnight, still in disbelief, asked, Which kid are you talking about? Suddenly, a small creature emerged from Aizawa's scarf. There's only one capable of this feat, Izuku Midoriya. Age 16 Quirk stopwatch. It allows the user to control and manipulate time. Aizawa sighed. The fact that you managed to learn everything about someone is very unnerving and concerning. Nizu, also known as Rat God, began to laugh. Suddenly, a skinny blonde man in a tan tuxedo spoke up. Aizawa, what's your evaluation of the boy? Aizawa looked at him and replied, He has a good heart, a calm mind, and is very rational. He always attempts to be as efficient as possible without compromising safety and quality. Aizawa's eyes brightened as he turned to the skinny man. All Might, are you thinking of? All Might nodded. Indeed. I feel my powers growing weaker day by day. We need someone young to step up in my place, to be my successor. From what I've seen of the kid, he is the best choice I will find. Now whether he will accept is a different issue. Aizawa pondered for a moment before sighing, Very well. Ask him, see what he says. All Might nodded and left the room. All Might sought out Izuku and called him over. After leading him to a secluded area, he began to share his story. A few years back, during a battle, I sustained a bad injury. He lifted his shirt to reveal a wound. Due to this, the amount of time I can be a hero is decreasing day by day. My quirk is called One for All. It has been passed down from generation to generation. I gained this injury while fighting my arch-nemesis, All for One, who has the ability to steal and give quirks. He looked at Izuku seriously. Tell me, young man, will you be willing to take on this burden? The burden of being my successor. Izuku took a moment to process everything. After 5 minutes, he looked up at All Might with determination. I'll do it. I'll be your successor. OFA can help me with the weaknesses of my quirk. With it, I'll be able to become an even better hero. All Might smiled, observing Izuku closely. It seems you have trained hard. As a result, you are already capable of inheriting OFA. He plucked a hair from his head and said, Eat this. Izuku hesitated but eventually consumed it. All Might instructed, You should go to sleep. It will take about a day to take effect. With that, All Might left. Izuku returned to his room, still processing everything, and went to bed, unaware of the challenges that awaited him. The next morning, Izuku noticed something different about his quirk. It felt more potent, almost as if he could manipulate the very fabric of space and time. OFA provided a significant boost to those with weaker quirks or no quirk at all. In his case, it amplified his already powerful quirk to extraordinary levels. Eager to test his abilities, he decided to visit Dagoba Beach. Upon arrival, he was dismayed to find the beach littered with trash. Once an appealing spot, it had become a dump. With a frown, he set to work. First, he wanted to see how long he could stop time. Taking a deep breath, he commanded, Stop, and time halted. He counted and discovered it lasted for 10 minutes, a significant improvement from his previous limit of 30 seconds. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He realized he could control time completely, both accelerating and slowing it down. He wondered if he could slow time for a single object. After an hour of intense training, he managed to do just that. It took him another 30 minutes to gain some control over it. Previously, he could only rewind time on inanimate objects, but now he could rewind time on living things as well. He discovered he could rewind time for days on a single object, but on a larger scale, he could only rewind for a day. As he trained, he became aware of the consequences of rewinding time without caution. Every action has repercussions, and he realized that large-scale rewinding could damage the fabric of spacetime. He decided to limit himself, resolving not to rewind time more than once a month unless absolutely necessary. However, on a small scale, he could rewind time as much as he wanted, even by centuries. Inspired, he decided to clean the beach. Those who visited the beach that day saw nothing unusual, but the next day, they were shocked to find the entire beach clean and clear, as though there was never anything there. On the other hand, he went over to UA to meet with All Might. He called him over and brought him to a secret place. He said, "Listen, I can reverse the time on your body so that you can regain your prime condition. But I cannot do it over and over again, just once. Okay?" All Might looked at Izuku in shock. He was completely speechless. Izuku put his hand on All Might's wound and used his quirk. He reverted time on his body by 10 years, taking him back to his prime. Just as he was going to give him the good news, he got a head-splitting headache and fell down to one knee. His teeth clenched together in a desperate attempt to endure the pain. He also felt that the fabric had indeed been damaged. He wouldn't be able to use that ability again for a month. All Might helped him up. "Are you okay, young Midoriya?" "Yes, All Might. I'll be fine. Just need a little rest. See you later." With this, Izuku left UA and started to go back home. As Izuku made his way home, he felt something growing in him like a volcano waiting to erupt. Deciding to check it out, he went to the beach once again. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and tried to figure out the source of the power. He found it to be a small orb of energy pulsing continuously. He slowly opened his eyes and started to walk towards his house. Once there, he entered his room and plopped down on his bed. Slowly, he went into a deep sleep. All of a sudden, he found himself surrounded by people he didn't know. There were 7 of them, each sitting on thrones. "Who are you people?" he asked. The people looked at him, and suddenly one of them walked up to him. He was a bald man who looked to be in his late 40s. He said, "My name is Daigoro Banjo. My quirk is Black WHP. Black WHP grants the user the ability to produce energy tendrils from any part of their body and command them at will. It is powered by emotions, primarily anger, meaning the greater the anger, the stronger the quirk becomes. However, if not fully in control of their emotions, the user runs the risk of losing control of Black WHP. My quirk will be the first you unlock." Izuku replied, "That's all well and good, but who are you and what do you mean by unlocking your quirk?" Suddenly, a appealing woman in her late 30s appeared. "My name is Nana Shimura. I was All Might Shimura, and I passed One for All down to him. All of us were users of One for All at some point. By now, all of us are gone, but a fragment of our soul still remains in the form of our quirks. As Toshi was quirkless, you don't see him here." Izuku replied, "I see. But who is Toshi?" Nana said, "All Might's actual name is Toshinori." "Oh, okay, got it." Suddenly, he noticed that the dream world seemed to be becoming unstable. "It seems you're waking up. Well, see you next time." Suddenly, everything went white, and he woke up. Izuku sat in his bed for a little bit, then got up and did some basic stretches. He wanted to try out the strength boost he got from One for All. He got up and went to the beach again. After making sure that no one was around, he started his training. First, he did a normal punch to understand his base level. Then he slowly started to tap into the power from One for All. He kept doing it until he felt it spread all over his body. Once he felt it had spread evenly, he punched out, and suddenly he saw a blast of air shoot forward at tremendous speed, splitting the ocean to some extent. Realizing that might be a bit too much, he started to train his control. When trying that, he noticed that the punch he shot out had damaged his arms slightly, nothing too serious, but enough to cause significant damage if he punched out a few more times. So he reverted time on his hand, fixing it. He spent the entire day doing that. Finally, the day came when they went back to UA. All the students appeared really excited. The moment Aizawa entered the room, everyone went quiet. The first thing he did was make an announcement. "Listen up. You'll be getting forms asking your parents for permission as UA is opening the dorms for the students for safety reasons. All the students got excited and went off about their day. Once classes were done, everyone made their way home to convince their parents. Izuku, on the other hand, went to All Might. He wanted to ask him for advice on how to control the Quirk better. After getting the advice he wanted, he went back as well with quite a few ideas for moves and attacks as well as a trump card. In a void devoid of life, a zone in space transcending time, stood a kid. No older than 16, he had green hair and freckles on his cheeks. Strangely enough, he felt very familiar, as if he was known to us, yet within that familiarity lay his mystery. The kid walked up to us and began to say, "You will never know my name, but that is fine. You will never know the struggles I endured or the pain I suffered, but that is fine. You will never know me as a human being, but that is fine, for in the hour that was to be my last, I embraced my fate as one of the many who are forgotten. However, my deeds and actions taken upon this day will remain forever in the story of another. Nameless, I will be present as one of the few who had a hand in shaping the world anew." Suddenly, a dark silhouette of a man appeared, holding a scythe. He looked at the boy. "Come, it is over now," he said. The boy looked at the man sadly. "Was it enough? They will die." "But not today," replied the man, who seemed to be death himself. "Then it was enough." The kid let out a sigh of relief and smiled brightly as he walked into the cold yet comforting embrace of death. Everything started to fade to white, and suddenly. This was a sneak peek at one of Izuku's new powers, the ability to see different timelines in his dreams. As the light faded, Izuku woke up in his bed, his breath ragged and cold sweat running over his skin. It took him a few minutes to settle down. Once he calmed, he began to think about the strange dream he had. Soon, he realized that it was too realistic to be just a dream. Then again, his quirk was the ability to manipulate time. Could it be? It was possible that what he saw was a different timeline. However, if that were true, there was a chance he would lose his ability to distinguish between reality and his dreams, becoming lost in timelines not his own. He shook off the thought and got ready for school. Starting today, the school would implement the dorm system. He dragged his tired body to school, still thinking about his dream and preparing for a long day ahead. When the students entered, they were greeted by an emotionless Aizawa. "Listen up. The battle isn't over yet," he said. The students panicked, exclaiming things like, "Oh God! More villains!" Aizawa activated his quirk to calm them down. Not villains. Rather, the UA Sports Festival. Ida, being his usual self, asked, "But sir, is it safe? After all, the villains attacked UFE. Couldn't they also attack during the sports festival?" Izuku looked at him incredulously. "Listen, Ida. The villains aren't that stupid. Do you realize how many pro heroes will be there during the event? Still think the villains will attack?" Realizing his mistake, Ida sat down. "Listen up, kids. You'll have a week to train and develop your special moves. Once you do that, you'll be taking another step toward becoming pros. This event is huge. Pro heroes will be watching you, and you will have a chance to catch their attention and in turn with them. So train hard." With that, all the students went home with different ideas for special moves. However, Izuku's mind was racing. He went to one of the foe cities to train after getting permission from Aizawa. He pondered what his special move could be and remembered he could revert time on all inanimate objects in a large area. I'll name it Turn Null. However, he knew that wouldn't be enough. He had multiple abilities but lacked a proper defense. Suddenly, an idea struck him. What if he folded space around himself to create a barrier and wrapped it in a time bubble? This way, nothing could reach him, and while moving through the space, time would accelerate, resulting in disintegration. He began to bring this idea to life. After nearly an hour, he finally managed it. It wasn't very stable, and he would need time to perfect it, so he called it a day and went to bed to rest. Izuku woke up from yet another dreamless sleep. Ever since that one time, he hadn't had any dreams like that. Or, to be precise, he had no dreams at all. Paying that no mind, he got up, freshened up, and went to Foe City D to improve his barrier. He spent hours trying to enhance it, but it remained at a certain level. He realized that if an opponent was too strong, they could break the barrier with an attack. Yes, it would nullify a considerable amount of damage, but he would still be hurt. He wanted to create an impenetrable barrier. Frustrated, he stopped fighting and returned to his dorm. Yes, his dorm. UA had implemented the dorm system for the students' safety. After changing his clothes, he went out. Out of ideas for developing his barrier, he headed to the library, the largest storehouse of information. He spent hours reading about different heroes with barrier-type quirks, even studying a hero who once had impenetrable barriers that couldn't be destroyed. They were so hard that it was said anyone attacking the barrier took damage instead of the barrier itself. After a few hours of reading, he took a break and noticed it was almost time for him to return. Just as he got up, a book caught his eye. It was an old book called Concept of Infinity. Intrigued, he took it with him. Once back in his dorm, he locked the door and began reading. The more he read, the more shocked he became. By chapter 5, he found what he was looking for. The concept of the infinite was truly bizarre, an unimaginable quantity contained between two easily definable quantities. He realized that while difficult, it wasn't impossible to achieve. All he needed to do was compress space enough to fit an infinitely large space into a finite one. However, that would require him to push the very limits of his quirk. I don't believe I will be able to perform something of this magnitude. Unless. Before, he would never have considered something so ambitious. However, after receiving an overhaul from One for All, his possibilities had truly become limitless. The next morning, he returned to Faux City D. Concentrating on the space around him, he managed to create a barrier 10 times stronger than those he had created before. Encouraged, he activated One for All. One for All 70%. Finite Infinity. He named this barrier Finite Infinity. After spending a good 15 minutes, he succeeded partially. He created a compressed folded space where, even without slowing time, the further something went into the barrier, the slower it moved. Then he incorporated his time aspect into it. For almost the entire week, he had been busy improving this ability. However, he needed a real trump card, one he could use without worrying about causing a collapse of the fabric of spacetime. After some time, he came up with a move, Broken World, Half Dimension. This move was just as it sounded. If used incorrectly, it could be very dangerous. He could literally have the dimensions of the world and trap a person in interdimensional space, freezing them completely. He could also create a dimensional rift that could split a person into two. It was a highly versatile move with its own risks. The week passed quickly, and the time had arrived for the UA Sports Festival. On the morning of the festival, everyone was excited. Izuku was talking to Bakugo, making plans. They decided to form a team with Jiro and Uraraka, creating a balanced group. Finally, Present Mike called Class A. Now here's the class that had a real encounter with villains. The best of the lot, Class A. Class A walked onto the field amidst cheers. One by one, the other classes were called in, but none received the same reaction as Class A. The students gathered together, discussing everything from who had the highest chance of winning to who would host the festival. As this was happening, the R-rated hero Midnight made her way onto the stage. The moment she appeared, cheers erupted in the stadium for obvious reasons. Both Izuku and Aizawa shared a deadpan look, thinking, really? Midnight began to roll a wheel with different events, which eventually stopped on the obstacle course. Two huge walls opened up, revealing the course. All the students got ready as the bell rang, and a gigantic glacier appeared at the starting line. In an instant, the glacier broke due to a large explosion. Amid the chaos, they failed to notice that a certain green-haired boy was missing. While they were busy impeding each other, Izuku was already far ahead. He had used his time stop ability to cover a good portion of the track. While the other participants were just reaching the first obstacle, he was crossing the second one. By the time the others reached the chasm of death, he was nearing the minefield. At this point, Mike noticed Izuku. Who is that boy? He is already at the minefield. The final obstacle. The crowd watched in astonishment as Izuku navigated the minefield effortlessly, strolling toward the finish line. Realizing he had arrived much too early, he decided to rest for a moment. Almost 10 minutes later, the others arrived in a flurry of photo finishes. Once that was done, the ranks were set. Izuku was first, Bakugo second, and Todoroki third. Next up was the cavalry battle. The first round was complete, and it was time for the second event. However, this was the UA Sports Festival, and things weren't always as they seemed. Midnight began announcing the points the students received, starting from the last place and building up to the first. The person who came in first is worth 1 million points. The moment the announcement was made, Izuku felt a large number of eyes on him. He sighed and began gathering his team, who already had a plan in place. The teams of 4 arranged themselves one by one, and once all 13 teams were ready, the cavalry battle began. Their strategy was straightforward. Bakugo would be the cavalry, Izuku the rider, Jiro their scout, and Uraraka's job was to keep the points ribbons secure. As the battles commenced, Izuku anticipated that almost all the teams would target them. However, he felt no fear. Instead, he smiled lightly. "Finite infinity," he said, creating a barrier around their entire team. He waited until about 4 teams had come close before opening his eyes and declaring, "Collapse." Suddenly, chaos erupted. The barrier he had created collapsed, and the space he had folded onto itself expanded outward. While it didn't cause any real damage, it flung the 4 teams away, with only one managing to recover. The other 3 teams were eliminated, discouraging the remaining teams, who shifted their focus elsewhere. Only Todoroki continued his pursuit, launching a glacier at Izuku. Izuku calmly observed the approaching glacier and said, "Excel." In an instant, all 4 of them shifted well out of the glacier's path. This was supportability, Excel, which sped up time for everything he touched, allowing them to move faster than usual. They watched as the glacier crashed into the wall. Izuku checked the time and smirked. 1 minute left. Desperate, Todoroki flung 3 mini glaciers at him. "Finite infinity, none shall pass." The glaciers approached but then seemed to stop, unable to move. This was a special version of finite infinity, enhanced with a time aspect. The alarm rang, signaling the end of the cavalry battle. The points were calculated, and the top 4 teams were decided. The 16 participants would face off in 1v1 battles to determine the winner. To allow everyone to rest, a 15-minute break was given. Once the break ended, the match schedules were set, and the time for the final event arrived. During the break, most participants tried to relax, while others sought information about their opponents. 5 minutes passed quickly when something interesting occurred. Todoroki called Izuku away for a chat. They moved to a secluded spot, where Todoroki asked, "Why are you holding back? I know you could have eliminated almost all the teams. Why not do it?" Izuku replied, "If I did, it wouldn't be fun, would it?" After a moment of silence, Todoroki continued, "Have you heard of Quirk marriages?" Izuku nodded, intrigued. "You probably know I'm the son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor." "That's a well-known fact," Izuku acknowledged. "Yes, but do you know about Quirk marriages?" "I'm aware of them. Endeavor has always been obsessed with becoming No. Since he never managed to surpass All Might, he had a Quirk marriage with my mother, hoping to ensure his son would. I will beat you, Midoriya. And I will do it without using my left side, without using his power." Izuku paused, then said, "You're either a fool or simply ignorant." "What?" Todoroki asked, confused. "Everyone out there is giving it their all, and you're here half-heartedly. If you truly believe you can beat me like that, then you're not just a fool, you're delusional." With that, Izuku turned and walked away, adding, "Also, it's your power, not his." He disappeared, leaving a shocked Todoroki behind. The first match was Izuku versus a kid named Monoma. Once they were on stage, the judges announced the start of the round. Monoma's quirk, Copycat, allowed him to copy the quirks of others, but he could only maintain a limited number at a time. As the round began, Izuku used one of his special moves, Excel. He vanished and reappeared in front of Monoma faster than he could blink, sending him crashing into the wall at breakneck speed. The round was over before it had even begun. The rest of the matches proceeded similarly, with the only notable battle being between Kirishima and Tetsu. Finally, the semi-finals arrived, featuring Izuku versus Todoroki and Bakugo versus Uraraka. The final rounds had begun, starting with Bakugo against Uraraka. The fight commenced, and Uraraka began running around the arena. All the time, Bakugo continuously tried to attack her, but she proved to be quite agile. As the battle progressed, the floor cracked and broke more and more. Suddenly, one of his attacks landed on her, and she was blown away. A loud gasp ran throughout the stadium, and some spectators began to criticize him, even calling him a villain. Izuku remained silent for a while, listening to the crowd's murmurs. Just as Aizawa was about to intervene, Izuku spoke up. In a low voice, he said, "Shut up." The moment he spoke, the entire stadium fell silent. He stood up from his seat. "If you think he doesn't deserve to be a hero because of this fight, then you should leave right now. For the heroes, consider quitting your job. He isn't doing this to hurt her, he is giving it his all because he acknowledges her strength. He recognizes that she is indeed quite dangerous. So shut your mouths before I shut it for you." Once he finished his speech, silence enveloped the stadium. However, the fight continued without interruption. The battle raged on until both were out of breath. Suddenly, Uraraka smiled, unnoticed by most, but Bakugo blushed lightly at her expression. Uraraka said, "You really are strong. But that is also your weakness. Here is my trump card." She brought her hands together, and a loud noise erupted. Bakugo's head snapped upward, and his eyes widened as he noticed a large amount of debris overhead. He raised his hands and unleashed a powerful explosion that destroyed almost all the debris. Uraraka fell to her knees, having given her all with that move. Despite her exhaustion, she tried to get up to continue, but Bakugo said, "You did well. Now rest. The fight is over." Uraraka looked up at Bakugo with a weak smile, but she couldn't maintain it and fainted. Midnight announced the end of the match. Bakugo slowly made his way to Uraraka, lifted her in his arms, and carried her off the stage to the medbay. The entire audience stood up, applauding their performance. Midnight announced a break, and the pro-hero Cementos began fixing the stage. After about 10 minutes, the stage was repaired, and the time had arrived for the most anticipated match, Todoroki versus Izuku. They made their way onto the stage. Todoroki looked determined while Izuku appeared calm and relaxed. The match started. The two contestants stared at each other for a moment, then suddenly, Todoroki launched a glacier at Izuku. He saw the glacier approaching but suddenly vanished from its path. Todoroki turned around to find Izuku behind him, saying, "Is that all? Pathetic." He attempted to attack again, only to hit nothing but air. "Why bother? You might as well give up and drop out of school. This platform has no place for those who don't give their all. You disappoint me." In a flash, Izuku punched Todoroki 3 times, sending him flying back. Todoroki managed to stop himself and shouted, "I'll never use his power." Izuku sighed, "What a fool you are. You have the potential to be one of the most powerful heroes in history, yet you refuse to use your power because of family issues. Look at yourself, you're already starting to feel hypothermia. What if civilians get trapped in ice and the only way to save them is to melt it? Will you let them suffer because you refuse to use a power that is your birthright? The ignorance of humanity never ceases to amaze. How long will it take to understand? It's your power, not his." Todoroki's eyes widened, and he smiled as flames began to roar around him. Izuku smiled and nodded approvingly. Suddenly, he disappeared and reappeared behind Todoroki. "Rest." He struck the back of Todoroki's neck, knocking him out. Midnight announced Izuku as the victor. Now it was time for the final match, Bakugo versus Izuku. Once the stage was repaired, the two friends stepped onto the stage and faced each other. The start of the round was announced, and Izuku immediately aimed a hook at Bakugo's jaw. Bakugo tilted his head and dodged the punch. A fierce battle ensued for about 10 minutes. Finally, Both contestants stood at opposite edges of the stage, sharing a mutual understanding that they would use their finishers. Bakugo unleashed his most powerful move, Howitzer Impact. In response, Izuku used his secret technique, a combination of martial arts, one for all, and his quirk, Tsukijin no Yari, Moonlit Javelin. Izuku tilted his body, slammed his foot down, and launched his hand at Bakugo like a real javelin. The two attacks collided, resulting in a massive explosion that destroyed the stage, enveloping it in smoke and dust. After a few moments, the smoke cleared, revealing Izuku standing at the edge of the stage and Bakugo embedded in a wall. The winner of this year's sports festival is Izuku Midoriya. The battle concluded, and both Izuku and Bakugo made their way to the medbay. After a while, they were called along with Todoroki as the top three. All Might himself appeared for the award ceremony. Once it was over, the sports festival officially concluded. Izuku returned tired and exhausted, which was to be expected. He plopped down on his bed, and in minutes, he was asleep. Recently, he had been having dreamless sleep. However, this time something seemed different. Noticed that he was suspended in a void in space, unable to move or speak. That was when he noticed a gigantic shadow standing in front of him. He could see only the shadow's eyes, which were crimson red and glowing with a cold sharpness. The shadow began to shrink until it was about the height of an average adult. Then it morphed into a handsome man who looked to be in his early 20s. He had white hair and a slightly pale skin tone. He smiled at Izuku. "So you're the one? The one who inherited my will." Izuku looked at him, confused. "What will? Oh, they never told you? Wait, can you read my thoughts?" "Indeed I can. I have no name. At least no more. You can refer to me as Fallon, though." "Just who are you? Why are you in my dreams? And what do you mean by inheriting your will?" "I believe I should explain then. Once upon a time, I was an extremely powerful being. I could destroy the world with a mere thought. However, my power became my downfall. Those I had trusted the most betrayed me. My body was destroyed, but my soul is immortal, eternal. I left my will behind, a will filled with vengeance, anger, and pain. I left behind my powers and knowledge. I had been waiting for someone deserving of my powers. Finally, I found one. It. Time manipulation is just the beginning. Now you may be wondering why I didn't show up earlier. That was because I was watching you, evaluating your performance. I found it to be satisfactory. So from now on, I'll help you become stronger. Also, the time has come for you to unlock your second power. It is known as Turn Null. When I was at my peak, I could erase entire worlds by myself using this ability. Teach me how to control it. I don't want to hurt anyone. All in due time. For now, you must learn to master what you have. Well, it seems our time is up. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then." Everything went white as the dream collapsed. Izuku woke up with a start, his mind still jumbled, trying to process what had just happened. He sat up on his bed and noticed something felt different. He realized his quirk had undergone an inexplicable change. He felt as though he was in complete control of the world, as though nothing could ever stop him. He knew this meant he needed to become much more powerful. Suddenly, a voice spoke in his head, "That will need time. For now, focus on learning how to use Turn Null. You have barely touched the surface. You have gotten decent at controlling the time aspect of the will, but you have just scratched the surface. You will become more powerful. You will become stronger than I could ever be. After all, I've already started working on divinizing OFA. But for now, learn to control the space aspect of the will. Until you become as strong as gods, I will hide the signature of your soul from them. I have been speaking to the holders of OFA as well. I'm going to train you every night in your dream space. You will need to become much stronger. Once you have some control over the space aspect, I will be able to transcend your soul. As it stands, your soul is that of a normal human. Once I transcend it, your soul will evolve into that of a lesser deity. You will gain a tremendous boost to your strength and unlock new abilities. But that will come in time. For now, go to class. I'll see you at night." With that, his voice faded away. Izuku sat there blankly for a few moments. Once he got past the shock, he got up, freshened up, and got dressed. He went to class. After a while, Aizawa came in and said, "You all did a decent job at the festival. But there's still one thing left to do. During the festival, several heroes watched your performance and have sent you internship requests. However, before that, you need hero names. They need to be good, or they can stick with you. I'm not good at this, so someone else will be taking over for this." The moment he said this, the door opened, and Midnight walked in. "I'm going to help you guys choose your hero names." A cheer rose from the class. One by one, the students chose their hero names. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He had thought a lot about it and decided on his name. He walked to the front of the class with a board in hand. On the board was written, "The Timeless Hero, Fallen." He figured the Fallen wouldn't sound very good, so he went with just Fallen. The name was approved by Midnight, and he returned to his seat. Everyone except Bakugo had their hero names by the end of the PRD. Bakugo kept choosing names with aggressive connotations, so he had to try again later. Izuku flipped through the application forms until he found one that caught his eye. Gran Torino? His eyes widened as he remembered something All Might had told him. Gran Torino was his mentor, the one who helped him control One for All. With this in mind, Izuku chose Gran Torino. The rest of the day was relatively uneventful. He returned to his dorm, plopped down on his bed, and soon fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, he found Fallen waiting for him. "Welcome, young one," Fallen said. Izuku looked at him and asked, "What should I call you?" "Calling you Fallen feels weird." "I see. Then call me Lucius." "Well, I hope you're ready, because you will soon learn the meaning of hardship." Izuku spent the entire time in his dream world training with Lucius. It didn't take long for him to figure out what Lucius meant by hardship. He focused on training his spatial awareness. Lucius explained, "If you wish to learn to control space, you must become one with it. Over time, you will learn to control more space. At first, it will be a small region, the size of a room. That will be your domain. Once you establish your domain, you will be unstoppable within it, a god of sorts. In that domain, the laws of space and time, the very fabric of reality, will bend to your will. However, you have yet to reach a level where you can create a domain. First, you must learn to become one with space. Sit." Izuku, eager to learn, sat down. "Close your eyes. Take deep breaths. Slowly, you will feel your consciousness expand. Soon it will reach out of your body and merge with the space around you. First do that. Then we shall proceed." Izuku spent 2 entire hours trying to do it. Just as he was about to give up, he felt something inside him resonating. It was growing and expanding, like a tempest surging out of his body and covering the entirety of his room. However, it soon ran out of energy. He sensed a limiter inside him slowly disappearing. When he opened his eyes, he felt as though the world around him was in tune with him. Lucius looked at him. "Good. You have completed the first step. Now for the next step. You have become one with the space surrounding you, but now you must make it bend to your will. However, that is easier said than done. Space only bends to one emissary, the supreme deity, a being even I dared not battle. So you must fight against space. You must bend it to your will." As Lucius had said, it was not easy. Izuku spent 5 hours trying to get the space to bend slightly. It resisted with everything he had, and he would need all the strength he could muster. The final hour was also spent on that task, but to no effect. He felt his consciousness fading and then woke up. It was 8:30 in the morning. He got up from bed and prepared to board his train. At 9 o'clock, he was at the station with the rest of his class, heading to Hosu for their work studies. They boarded the train, and sometime later, they reached their destination and parted ways. Izuku made his way to the address he had received. When he reached the house, he walked up the stairs until he found the room where Gran Torino lived. The door was open, and he immediately went on alert. He found Gran Torino lying on the ground, surrounded by what appeared to be blood. Just as he was about to get closer, he noticed something was off. The blood seemed far too viscous and its shade was not right. He realized it wasn't blood but rather ketchup. He walked up to Gran Torino and said, "You can get up now." Gran Torino got up with a shocked expression as Izuku chuckled. "Nice try, but you'll have to do better." Izuku could already tell this was going to be an interesting time. Once Gran Torino got over the initial shock, he became serious. He inspected Izuku with keen eyes. This kid. He possesses a tremendous amount of power. Even though he seems relaxed, his muscles are brimming with potential. If my calculations are correct, he should be able to handle 40% of One for All without serious damage to himself. This is good. He has a lot of potential. Izuku was indeed capable of using 40% of One for All without harming himself. However, that was the original One for All. The current version was something beyond anyone's imagination. The previous One for All's 40% was about 4% of the current one at stage. After Lucius had refined it, there were 5 stages of One for All. Stage 1. It was 10 times more powerful than the original version and much easier to control. Stage 2. It was 10 times stronger than Stage 1 and introduced the feature of black WHP. This stage also allowed him to compress the internal kinetic energy built up to release in one destructive burst. However, there was a limit to the compression. Overcompressing the energy could cause injury. Stage 3. This stage was 10 times stronger than Stage. It unlocked 2 quirks, Float and Smokescreen. This stage had a special feature. He could enter a temporary berserk state that boosted his physical capabilities by 100% for 30 seconds. However, once the berserk PRD ended, Izuku would be temporarily paralyzed and unable to move for about a minute, leaving him in a weakened state. Stage 4 was 10 times stronger than Stage 3 and unlocked the Quirk FA gene. This stage also had a special ability, allowing the user to enter a temporary war demon state, boosting all physical capabilities by 500% for 1 minute. After this duration, it triggered a special state called Final Stand, where a single attack would cause the user's physical stats to skyrocket by 1000%, giving them an advantage in close battles. This could also stack with the berserk state, but once the PRD ended, the user would lose all power and might fall unconscious. Stage 5 was 20 times stronger than Stage 4 and unlocked the Quirk Gear Shift. This stage had a powerful ability called Overdrive, enhancing all stats by 500% and heightening senses to extraordinary levels. A more powerful version, Overclock, boosted stats by 1000%, but it placed severe strain on the body, risking collapse if used for too long. Lucius had completely transformed the quirk, requiring Izuku to adjust, which he knew would be challenging. Gran Torino advised him, "Listen up, kiddo. Activate OFA at the lowest possible percentage, then slowly spread it all over your body. Once that is done, ramp up the percentage." Izuku nodded and followed the instructions, but soon realized it was much harder than he had anticipated. Though it sounded simple, it proved to be quite frustrating. In medieval times, strength determined life and death. The strong lived, while the weak perished. Yet, some were different, lonely not for lack of company, but because they were too strong. In a field stained red with blood, a man stood alone, facing 11 soldiers, all radiating power. He had green hair and dull eyes, soaked in the blood of his enemies, holding a sword in hand, weary from battle. Yet he stood tall, defying fate. He charged at the 11, who underestimated him. He had earned the title, the Bringer of Death, for a reason. He fought fiercely, vowing to live a life steeped in war, determined to die on the battlefield rather than in comfort. One soldier swung a large war hammer, but the man leaped over it and swiftly took his opponent down. 1 down, 10 left. He fought like a mythical demon, relentless and unyielding. Despite taking several blows that could fell a normal person, he pressed on. After an hour of fierce combat, he emerged victorious, but he could feel his time was short. Darkness encroached, and pain coursed through his body as he trudged across the battlefield, the last survivor among the fallen. He stood amidst the bodies, a prideful son of heaven, refusing to bow to death. He stabbed his sword into the ground for support, breathing heavily, his vision fading. The cold was lonely, but he remained resolute. With the last of his strength, he stood upright, challenging the heavens even in death. His breathing ceased, and the last trace of life faded. Such was the cruelty of the world. No one would know his name or the pain he endured. But they would remember that it was this man who faced all adversity head-on, battling against stronger foes. His name was Izuku Midoriya, the Eternal Blade. Izuku had already become accustomed to these dreams. He had asked Lucius, who explained that these were different versions of himself from various universes. Now, he tried to learn from the people in his dreams, attempting to understand their feelings. After getting ready, he went to Gran Torino for training. This was the second day. The previous day had focused on increasing his control over One for All, OFA. Gran Torino realized that it wasn't that Izuku couldn't control it well enough, but rather that his body struggled to handle the power. After a week of training, Izuku managed to control up to 10% of OFA, which meant he could stand toe-to-toe with All Might. Following that, Gran Torino and Izuku began regular patrols. One day, during these patrols, chaos erupted in Hosu. Shigaraki and several Nomu attacked the city, setting it ablaze. Pro-heroes from all around were called to help bring the situation under control, but many were unaware of a hidden danger lurking in the shadows. In Hosu, an infamous serial killer known as Stain, the hero killer, had emerged. He had killed several heroes and critically injured many more, evading capture. Izuku and Gran Torino arrived at the scene where the Nomu were present. Just as Izuku was about to join the battle, he received a notification from Ida, who was also interning in Hosu, asking for backup. Without hesitation, Izuku activated OFA and rushed to Ida's location, hoping he wouldn't be too late. When he arrived, he was shocked to find Ida lying on the ground, bleeding, with Stain poised to strike him. Nearby, the pro-hero manual was incapacitated. Izuku activated his will and took Stain down so quickly that no one realized what had happened until moments later. After ensuring Ida received medical attention, he returned to the battlefield, where he punched a Nomu through 2 buildings, taking it out effortlessly. He was like an unstoppable force, dispatching the Nomu with ease. Just as he was about to take out the final Nomu, a blast of air hit him from behind, sending him crashing through 3 buildings. He coughed up a bit of blood and slowly got up, finally seeing what had attacked him. It appeared human but lacked facial features, sporting large black wings and pale skin. In its hands were glowing spears, likely made of pure energy. Izuku felt apprehensive, realizing this was not a creature meant to exist in his world. It belonged to a higher power. Activating his full power, Izuku understood that he needed to go all out from the start if he wanted any chance of victory. He had spent considerable time training with Gran Torino, but what Gran Torino didn't know was that Izuku had also trained with Lucius. Not all of those sessions were focused on battle. Lucius had taught him about various deities and entities. When Izuku saw the creature, it felt oddly familiar. He recalled Lucius mentioning interdimensional entities called the Guardians, immensely powerful beings that served a dark god, corrupting worlds and harnessing souls. The Guardian before Izuku was relatively weak, a lower deity in terms of rank, but still a challenge. Izuku knew he would have a tough fight ahead. He went all out from the beginning, but unbeknownst to him, mysterious marks began spreading across his body. Izuku charged at the Guardian, utilizing everything he had learned. He condensed space into his fist and struck out. The Guardian countered, and their attacks collided, sending them both flying. Izuku's hand felt numb from the impact, and he clenched his fist to regain feeling. Realizing the difficulty of the battle ahead, he prepared to use his trump cards. He started condensing the space around his fist, creating rifts in the air. The Guardian gathered power, forming a blade of pure energy and dashing toward him. Izuku closed his eyes, waiting for the right moment. When the Guardian was close, he opened his eyes and unleashed a devastating punch. "It's over," he declared, releasing one of his most powerful attacks, Lonely Heaven, Secular Existence. This was part of a series of moves he was developing, known as Divine Fist, Envoy of Heaven. With a collision that shattered the Guardian's blade, his fist continued forward, crashing into the creature and sending it flying. The Guardian flew back several meters and stopped. Izuku approached it and saw a gigantic hole in its torso. It was dead. The entire region had been devastated. The city was in ruins, resembling a scene from hell. Izuku made his way over to the heroes. The battle was finished. It hadn't been easy, but it could have been much worse. The casualties were kept to a minimum. A few days later, the internship came to an end. All the students made their way back to UA, and Izuku was no exception. He took his leave from Gran Torino and boarded the train, determined to enter seclusion and train hard. He felt he was still too weak. In a pile of rubble, the Guardian's corpse lay beneath the debris. Suddenly, its body started twitching, and the hole began to repair itself. Within moments, it was as though the wound had never existed. It blasted out of the rubble, and though it had no face, its anger was palpable. It stared in the direction where Izuku had gone and took off. The Guardian was not truly defeated and would not stop until it was. Izuku was returning home, completely unaware of the impending danger. He was engaged in conversation with Lucius, expressing that the current one for all felt resistant, as if it were not a part of him. Lucius looked at Izuku calmly and said, "The problem is not with one for all, it's with you. Before, you didn't experience this issue because you embraced it. You accepted it as part of you and weren't afraid. However, after I revamped it, it became much more powerful, which made you fearful. This reaction wasn't conscious, it was instinctive. Until you fully accept it and stop fearing yourself, you will hold yourself back and won't access your full potential." Suddenly, the train shook violently, barreling off the bridge and crashing to the ground. The result was catastrophic, and many people were hurt. Izuku managed to protect himself at the last second. As he looked around, the area was engulfed in flames. Then he noticed something walking toward him through the fire. Shocked, he realized it was the Guardian. He couldn't believe his eyes, certain it was dead. Suddenly, it vanished and reappeared in front of him, striking him square in the chest and causing him to cough up blood. He was flung away, slowly getting up despite the pain. He felt his internal organs had been injured. Confused, he noted that the blow felt much stronger than during their previous fight. Determined, he activated One for All and charged at it, but his punch didn't even scratch the Guardian. Instead, it struck him again, sending him flying back. Injured and barely able to stand, he began to lose hope. Am I going to die here? Is this the end? I will not let it end like this. I still have so much to do. I cannot. I will not give up. I need to protect them. Suddenly, Jiro's face flashed before his eyes. Get up. Get up. Get up, damn it. Izuku slowly began to rise. Unbeknownst to him, One for All started to pulsate. In this moment of crisis, standing on the brink of death, he subconsciously accepted One for All. His fear of death helped him overcome his fear of losing control. OFA full cowling, 70%. He suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of the Guardian, catching it off guard. Knowing he should be able to defeat it now, he unleashed his strongest attack at that point. Forgotten Heaven, Denounced Shrine. The punch held catastrophic power. When it landed on the Guardian, its body blew apart, unable to withstand the force. The ground around them shattered. Izuku slowly got up, blood spilling from his mouth. He fell down, severely injured. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, Jiro's smile flashed before his eyes, and he heard the sirens of emergency services approaching. Izuku spent the next 3 days in a coma, showing no signs of waking up. A few days later, he began to show signs of consciousness. After almost a month, he finally woke up, but something about him had changed. He seemed completely in tune with his surroundings, as if the space parted to let him pass. It took another week for him to be discharged from the hospital. Once released, he went straight to UA. After getting permission from the teachers, he immediately entered seclusion. He learned that the exams were approaching, consisting of both theoretical and practical parts. During his seclusion, he meditated for an entire day. While he was in the coma, Lucius had informed him about the cosmic tier system, a universal measurement of power. There were several different tiers: lesser human, true human, greater human, supreme human, lesser deity, true deity, greater deity, supreme deity, lesser angel/devil, True Angel/Devil, Greater Angel/Devil, Supreme Angel/Devil, Lesser Divinity, True Divinity, Greater Divinity, Supreme Divinity. As it stood, Izuku was a supreme human. If he unleashed his full power, he could challenge a lesser deity. During his training, he had completed his Divine Fist style, Envoy of Heaven, which consisted of 13 fists and 1 forbidden move. He also began developing another style, Divine Fist style, Envoy of Hell, which similarly had 13 fists. However, he found himself unable to use any of the fists beyond the 8th, as attempting to do so caused him pain. To improve his body's constitution, he worked diligently with Lucius to strengthen himself. 2 months passed quickly, and the time for the exams arrived. Emerging from his seclusion, Izuku seemed different. His eyes reflected a calmness that suggested he had transcended his emotions. As the students gathered for the final exams, they took the theoretical portion first. Some were elated, while others were disheartened, but Izuku remained serene. Next came the physical exams, and the students were surprised to learn they would be fighting against their teachers instead of foe villains. The battles were set up in pairs, with 2 students against 1 teacher. As the matches progressed, victories and defeats were shared among the students. Finally, it was time for the last battle, Izuku Midoriya versus All Might. Unlike the other teachers, All Might did not hold back. As the fight commenced, Izuku entered the battlefield with calm confidence. When All Might launched an attack, Izuku raised his hand, effortlessly stopping the punch. The spectators were astonished as Izuku countered, sending All Might flying through multiple buildings. Satisfied, Izuku acknowledged his strength compared to ordinary humans. After the exams concluded, the students returned to their dorms. Izuku entered his room and asked Lucius, "What is the strongest being you know of?" Lucius took a moment before responding, explaining that true strength is rare and that normal humans exist in a 3-dimensional space, unable to comprehend higher dimensions. He elaborated on the evolution of beings as they reach higher levels of power, such as supreme deities and supreme angels, who can perceive additional dimensions. Lucius continued, noting that not all supreme angels can become lesser divinities, as only a few possess the potential. Once a being transcends dimensionality, they exist in all dimensions simultaneously. He mentioned beings known as boundless beings, who surpass the ranking system, including the Anti-Principal, Sam Howell, the Transcendent, and the Scarlet King. These beings are capable of unimaginable destruction, with Scarlet King being the most powerful, able to erase entire universes with a mere thought. Izuku remained silent, processing the weight of this information. This was when he realized just how weak he was compared to the beings who had reached the pinnacle of power. The exam results came in. While a vast majority had passed, some had failed. Aizawa entered the classroom and announced that they were going to a summer camp. Those who had failed would also attend but would have to work harder than the rest. As a result, those who had failed looked terrified, fully aware of the challenges ahead. They all boarded the bus that would take them to the camp, chatting amongst themselves, except for a few, including our protagonist. He was listening to music and contemplating time, wanting to become stronger but feeling stuck at a bottleneck. He knew he was on the brink of a breakthrough but couldn't quite get through to the next layer. He asked Lucius for advice, and Lucius explained that while he had gained enough strength, his comprehension was lacking. Determined, he decided to focus on developing his understanding of time. He pondered several concepts related to time, wondering, what is time? Can it truly be controlled? Eventually, he realized that time was like a flowing river. It could not be stopped. If one tried to halt it, it would either break through or spill over. However, one could limit the flow, reducing it gradually. He began experimenting and soon discovered that time itself could not be controlled. This was why his attempts to forcefully alter space-time had caused damage. But what about speed? Speed was an attribute of time. While time itself could not be controlled, he could manipulate its attributes, such as speed. He realized he could decrease it so much that it would go in reverse. With this new approach, he shattered the barrier that had prevented him from advancing to the next tier. Power surged through his body, and unbeknownst to him, his eyes began to glow. After a few minutes, The glow faded, and they arrived at the base of a mountain where the summer camp would take place. The bus ascended the mountain before coming to a stop. 3 women in striking outfits appeared, recognized by some students as the Wild Wild Pussycats, a group of 4 heroes. Moments later, one of the women, whose gaze was quite intense, nearly pounced on Izuku. Quick on his feet, he sidestepped her, allowing her to pass. One of the other girls, introducing herself as Mandalay, said, "Sorry about her. She is approaching the age of marriage." This creates a few problems. Unbeknownst to them, a certain purple-haired girl was not pleased with this at all, as she had developed feelings for the green-haired boy. Mandalay continued, "Your summer camp will begin at the top of the mountain where we will be waiting. Your bus won't help you." Some students realized what was about to happen and sprinted toward the bus, but Mandalay used her quirk to cause a landslide, sending most of the students flying. Izuku and Jiro, who had been standing together, held hands, and Izuku used space movement, one of his newer skills, to teleport them into the sky. Jiro blushed from embarrassment, but they landed safely once the landslide settled. They teleported together to the top of the mountain, surprising the Pussycats and Aizawa with their early arrival. After arranging their rooms, they sat together in silence, both blushing. Izuku had no idea what he had done, and after entering his room he realized it, nearly screaming from embarrassment, while Jiro felt a rush of excitement. After a few moments, they both turned to each other and said, "I dash." Their faces flushed again. Izuku finally spoke, "Sorry about back then. I didn't mean to," but Jiro interrupted, "It's fine. I just hadn't expected it. Not that I minded." Oh. Jiro didn't know that Izuku had heard her clearly. After a moment of silence, she took a deep breath, steeled herself, and said, "Izuku, I like you." Turning red, she sighed in relief, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. When she looked at Izuku, she saw him staring, stunned. I like you too." Hearing this, Jiro beamed and leaned in to give Izuku a quick kiss on the cheek before scurrying away. For nearly 5 minutes, he sat there in shock, then smiled slightly as he got up and returned to his room. Upon entering, he realized he could sense his surroundings more clearly. Somehow, after accepting their feelings, his domain had expanded. He focused and expanded his domain, realizing it now covered the entire mountain. Nothing on that mountain could occur without his knowledge. Just a few hours later, the students arrived at the peak, tired and hungry. They had a grand feast and fell asleep, completely unaware of what was brewing in the shadows. Izuku was the only one who felt something was off, though even he could not imagine the crisis that was to come. In the initial stages when quirks had just emerged, some individuals could cause immense destruction using specific attacks known as origin arts, which had been lost to time. These attacks could reshape entire cities and even affect countries. Izuku and the others worked hard, training diligently, prompting Aizawa and the Pussycats to organize a competition between classes 1A and 1B, who had also arrived. The competition was simple. Each class would take turns trying to scare members of the opposing class. Initially, everyone had fun, though some were more frightened than others. After about 30 minutes, Izuku noticed a rift in space. His domain was disrupted. Concentrating, he realized multiple people were arriving, scattered across the area. Suddenly, a large plume of smoke appeared, accompanied by raging flames. Izuku looked at Aizawa, who gave him a discreet nod of approval. Dashed into the forest, where 2 villains attempted to ambush him. With a swift rotation on his toes, he delivered a punishing roundhouse kick, knocking one villain into the other, leaving them both unconscious. Moving deeper into the forest, he took down a total of 7 villains by the time he reached the core. There, he encountered a man covered in scars, releasing blue flames. The man noticed him and shot flames in his direction. Izuku squinted, and everything slowed to a crawl. He calmly approached the man and delivered a crushing punch to his face. Using space movement, he teleported to where most students were gathered and saw an oversized raccoon attacking Todoroki and Bakugo. He appeared above it and punched it so hard that it became indented into the ground, continuing to fight in this manner. Suddenly, he heard Mandalay's voice in his head. Attention all students. Villains have attacked us. We, the teachers, give you permission to use your quirks. The target of the villains is Katsuki Bakugo. Protect him as best you can. Izuku dashed toward where Bakugo had been but only found Todoroki lying on the ground, breathing hard and gritting his teeth. They got him. I tried to stop them but... Izuku placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing lightly. After about an hour, all the students had gathered, and the police arrived, arresting around 30 villains, some of whom were quite dangerous. Izuku had beaten one man unconscious with a single punch, later identified as a wanted criminal named Muscular, responsible for the deaths of several heroes. Thus, the summer camp, which was supposed to be a relaxing training session, ended in a way no one could have expected. As the students let down their guards, a terrifying aura and killing intent washed over them. Izuku looked up to see a man flying high in the sky, John Abrahams, an American criminal known for his immense power and lack of regard for human life. He seemed to be preparing a large-scale attack. By the time the pros reacted, it was already too late. He had unleashed his attack. Izuku felt horrified at the sight of it, recognizing it as the origin art, Thunderbolt Wyvern. Gritting his teeth, he prepared an attack of his own. Origin Breaker, Thunderstorm Hell. He unleashed an attack that was equal to, if not slightly stronger than John's. The two attacks canceled each other out almost completely, but Izuku's Thunderstorm Hell overpowered Thunderbolt Wyvern, striking John Abrahams and knocking him out. However, unleashing such a powerful attack took its toll. Izuku injured himself in the process and spent all his energy, falling unconscious from overexertion. Unbeknownst to him, he gained a nickname due to this event, the Origin Breaker. Choice. A fundamental part of humanity. It leads us to believe we can choose what is good for us and what is not. Yet, do we truly have a choice, or is it merely an illusion? Asked a masked man in a tuxedo, seated before a group of individuals who, at first glance, appeared to be ordinary people but were, in fact, heroes. You see, I'm not like 70% of the population. I was not one of the fortunate few born with powers. Even those born with quirks may not be accepted by others. People discriminate based on whose power is stronger, whose power is considered heroic, and whose is deemed villainous. What a bunch of nonsense. In this world, all that matters is strength. Strength decides who lives, who dies, who prospers, and who disappears. It's as though we've regressed over time, gradually losing our sense of identity. The man paused for a moment, then looked up. People will want to know my name, but I cannot share it now. So how about you call me? Vengeance. Today, I will enact my vendetta against this society that shaped me. I seek nothing for myself. I am neither a hero, a villain, nor a vigilante. All I want is to watch the world burn, just as it has done to me. His voice cracked as he spoke, and he took a deep breath. So let's play a little game. You have until... He glanced at his watch. 12 tomorrow. That gives you 24 hours. At noon, one of these heroes, a pillar of this admittedly flawed society, will lose their life. I hope you find them, or else. Well, they are still human. If exposed to enough force, even their bodies would disappear. So I bid you adieu and the best of luck. Izuku Midoriya, who had been in a coma for the last 15 days, finally regained consciousness. Well done. In the final moments of your battle, you broke past your subconscious limits and achieved what we call a limit break. It allows you to unleash 150% of your power in one blow, but it is usable only as a last resort. Lucius said to Izuku, "Our time here is coming to an end. I believe I have granted you a powerful finisher, a trump card, at least until you can use your divine fists. An old friend of mine showed this to me years ago." Lucius took a deep breath as energy gathered into a formless sword. The moment the sword began to take shape, the temperature rose violently, as if all creation were turning to a seething hell. I'm not the invincible swordsman, Jubii, nor the Mestiar of espionage, Hanzo, or the renowned caster, Ipose. Why, out of all people, was I, a swordsmith, summoned? For being unable to foresee that this is your defeat. Once seeking the ultimate blade, A blade of steel that cuts neither flesh nor bone nor life. What I seek is the clearance of resentment, the severing of bonds, fate, and destiny. That is to free oneself from karma. Upon one's arrival are countless tools, carved over 1,000 blades, forming a pile of swords. This is the place where all paths cross, where all desires flow, where all deaths await. My whole life was for this single swing. The heart of the blade is right here. Take this is my Tsumukari Muramasa. The world turned to ashes and reformed into a blade, a sword that severed the very fabric of space-time, even fate itself. He lightly swung the blade and severed the entire reality that had manifested. It was an appealing idea, but it would never truly work. He was limited by the constraints of his mortality. But I am not. Just as you are not. Lucius stopped speaking, and the dream world began collapsing, signifying that Izuku was waking up. When Izuku opened his eyes, he was met with Jiro and his mother. After a heartwarming moment, Aizawa entered the room alongside All Might. They informed him of vengeance and the threat he had issued. Izuku fell into deep thought. According to the police, this individual had made no ransom demands or other threats. It was as though he simply wanted to kill the heroes. That was when Izuku realized something. This person truly did not want anything other than to watch the world burn. He wished for society to lose trust in heroes and crumble under the chaos it had created. That person is not the enemy. We are our own worst enemy. After listening, Izuku entered a meditative state to speak with Lucius. Even though he was powerful by human standards, he still lacked the vast experience that Lucius possessed. He saw Lucius sitting in a field, gazing at the moon as the wind blew gently. Lucius looked back and saw Izuku standing behind him. "Come, young one," said. "Nature's beauty has never ceased to amaze me." Sensing Izuku's inner turmoil, he asked, "What troubles you?" Izuku shared everything that had transpired. Lucius listened patiently and then said, "People like this. They have nothing left to lose. That makes them dangerous, for they believe they have no weaknesses. They are willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill their dreams." Lucius' expression grew solemn. However, such individuals are usually broken, far too much so. They no longer care for anything. Unfortunately, they cannot be redeemed. They can only be ended. His tone grew cold and desolate. "You need to understand this, young one. While it is noble to wish to save everyone, some people are too far gone to save. Trying to save them will only bring you pain." Lucius stood and beckoned Izuku to follow him. "Let me tell you a story." Lucius and Izuku walked together as Lucius began his tale. Several centuries ago, there was a man. The common people hailed him as a hero. His enemies called him the Crimson Reaper, Death's Herald, and other such names. However, he had paid a heavy price for such fame. He spent countless sleepless nights surrounded by the memories of friends and foes alike, all lost in a war they had no reason to fight. He was the only survivor of that bloody conflict. When he returned, his allies celebrated him as a hero, but he remained silent. After the war, he received many honors and was granted the title of Blood Lion. Yet he felt no pride. He knew the truth. He had taken countless lives to survive. He felt no courage or bravery, only fear of death. Izuku sat down in front of Lucius. Afterwards, he fought in 2 more wars and then disappeared. He promised that in the nation's time of need, he would return. Years passed, and people gradually forgot the name Blood Lion. Then disaster struck. An army of unmatched strength appeared, leaving destruction in their wake. Within a week, the nation was cornered, hoping for a savior. In response to their calls, the Blood Lion returned. However, he was old, just a shadow of his former self. The enemy knights laughed at the sight of the old man approaching alone, calling him an ancient relic, a forgotten shadow. What they did not know was that he had come for one last battle, fully aware of his mortality. He lifted his blade and fought fiercely, taking down the entire enemy army by himself. The battle lasted several days, and in the end, those who survived fled in terror. The Blood Lion stood tall, his body covered in blood, both his own and that of his enemies. Wounds marred his form, Yet he remained standing as he drew his last breath. That man was a warrior, but he was still only a man. You, youngling, have the potential to become a god. Show me you are worthy. Achieve strength that would make me proud to be your predecessor. As he finished speaking, the mindscape went white, and Izuku was forced out of his meditative state. When he opened his eyes, he was horrified by what he saw, the entire city consumed by flames, with his friends and family lying around him, all injured but alive. He focused and realized the cause of this destruction. A high-level guardian, the adjudicator. Power level, 5A. This won't be easy. I'm still at 6A. Izuku steeled himself for the battle ahead. He knew the fight would be tough. Doubts crept in. How could he, a boy who merely dreamed of greatness, face a being that could be called a demigod? He considered fleeing with his friends and family or buying them enough time to escape. But the adjudicator would not wait for him to ponder his choices. It charged at him, slamming its foot into his chest and sending him flying. He rolled along the ground, struggling to breathe. At least 2 ribs are broken, he thought, coughing up a little blood. Gritting his teeth, he got up. Lost heaven, pathless sky, he shouted, attacking the adjudicator. His fist connected with its hand, momentarily halting its advance. But then the adjudicator retaliated, punching him back into a building. He fought to stay conscious. Suddenly, he heard Lucius' voice. Is that all you're capable of? I'm disappointed. I expected more from you. Where is your drive? Did you forget what you wanted? You wished to protect your friends and family, did you not? How will you do that if you're dead? Izuku pushed himself up. But how? It's so strong. I can't even make it move an inch. Lucius replied calmly, that is because you are afraid. It is natural to feel fear, but if you let it control you, you can never become powerful. What do you fear? The day you realize you will become far more powerful than it could ever be. You are more than capable of fighting it, but you hold yourself back. So, I'll ask again, what scares you? Izuku's eyes widened as he realized the truth. He was afraid of death, afraid of losing those close to him. Death. I'm afraid of death, he admitted. Lucius smiled. Then become death. Izuku was taken aback. What? You heard me. Become death. If death scares you, then rule over it. You are on the path of the strong. Remember, this path will always be filled with death. Wherever you go, you will leave behind a trail of it. Accept that. Izuku fell silent, recalling all the battles he had fought. He clenched his fist and slammed it into the ground, feeling an unspeakable rage. Then I shall do just that. I tried my best to protect my friends and save them all. But I cannot succeed in that. I will destroy all my enemies to protect my friends and family. To protect life. I shall become death. Unknown to him, the skies began to darken. Lightning fell all around him as a black aura enveloped him, and he felt his strength surging. The agitator had begun to walk away, believing the fight was over, when it sensed a sharp spike in power. Penance of heaven, eternal path. The agitator barely registered a fist appearing before its face before being sent flying back, rolling for a good 50 meters before coming to a stop. It saw the boy it had been fighting standing tall, a confident and determined look in his eyes. As the agitator carefully got up, it suddenly felt a wave of fear wash over it, as if it were staring death in the face. Izuku calmly approached. Descent of heaven, end of incarnation. He arrived before the agitator and slammed it into the ground with such force that the entire city trembled, obliterating the area around him. This is the end for you, Izuku said coldly, and the agitator realized its fate. Yet, it began to laugh, finding the situation amusing. You can kill me, godling, but you cannot stop what is coming. He is coming. He will devour you and this world. Izuku remained silent, pulling his fist back to deliver the final blow. Judgment of heaven, God's descent. Izuku remained unconscious for 2 days. When he awoke, he learned that the city had been devastated, with many casualties, though none were students, only a few heroes had been lost. He felt relieved that none of the fallen were close to him, But that relief was short-lived as he recalled the educator's ominous words. Izuku stared down at his hands, contemplating the vow he had made. He had chosen his path, but was he truly prepared? Clenching his fists to dispel his doubts, he got up and walked to the room where Jiro and his mother were. He observed them through the glass before stepping forward. Lucius, be honest with me. How powerful am I compared to these beings? He asked solemnly. Lucius was silent for a moment before responding, not enough. Not nearly enough. As it stands, they could kill you without even realizing it. You couldn't even make them flinch. Izuku smiled sadly. In the end, I can't do it, can I? Is it really possible to defeat these beings by yourself? Lucius remained quiet before answering, do not underestimate the power of one person. One person was all it took to bring about.